Welcome, everybody, to the best damn pod in the land. I'm your host, Chad Stryker. With me, as always, Dave Jack. And we have a special guest from the Cocaine Willie podcast, Andre Chef Napier. Andre, I'm going to ask you first, how are you? Thank you for coming on our show. We appreciate it. We love doing these pod mashups. And here we are. We're going to get some good information about Big Will Howard. But first, Andre, how are you, man?
Dan, Chad, how are you? I'm doing good. I'm doing well.
Good. Yeah.
Hey, want to give a quick shout out to Luke from College Tailgate for connecting us. So
Absolutely.
Shout out to
100%.
he listens to both our shows and really good guy. He's actually here in Nashville. We're going to try to connect for a game this year. So
Fantastic. Yeah. So we are, again, we love to do pod mashups. This is our third. So thanks, Andre, again, for coming on. Told you off air, and I mean it. I have a ton of respect, and Dan, I know you can echo this sentiment for the Kansas State program, Bill Snyder himself. So how, why? I mean, you're near and around Columbus now. Are you a Kansas State fan?
How I became a Kansas State fan, it's not really a long story, but the formative years that I grew up and started really attaching myself to football. I was an Army brat, so we were stationed in Fort Riley, and it's a stone's throw away from Manhattan, Kansas, and going to games on the weekends, having them locally on TV or in just the news around Kansas State, being in my formative years when they're really, really good after like the turmoil of before Bill Snyder when they were absolutely terrible. I really attached myself to the program, the university, and no matter where we moved, whether it be Fort Eustis, Virginia, back to Ohio, Germany, it doesn't matter. I was always, donning the purple, always repping K-State. So I never let it go. I'm a grown man in Ohio, and I'm still rocking Kansas State.
That's awesome. I love it. And absolutely formative years are a big thing. And so Dan, I guess if you don't mind, I'll ask a follow up because I really got to know. And it's beyond when Dan first sent me the name of your podcast, I was like, I have some questions, Dan, and because we pick on each other, because I have, this looks like a marijuana leaf, but it's a Buckeye leaf. But so we have Cocaine Willie and marijuana. But so where does that podcast name come from?
Well, my buddy Bob Trollsby on the internet, love the guy, Matt Marchesini, Fireball Matt. We decided that we wanted to come up with a fan-centric podcast. There's a lot of Kansas State podcasts out there. You got the journalistic side that, cover the in-depth part of Kansas State sports. You got probably the biggest brand of Kansas State fan podcasts in the Bosco's Boys. And we're kind of a spinoff of that because after we would do guest spots on the Bosco's Boys, voicing our opinions, we would go after the show and we would just, talk ball, talk what's ever on our mind in Kansas State, whether it's, doesn't necessarily have to be PG. We're kind of letting it fly. And it's kind of an homage to the 1970s era of Kansas State when we had an absolutely wild looking Wildcat as our mascot. And he was, what we donned him, not me, but like people back in the era, was the Cocaine Willie. And, we have Willie the Wildcat now, but in that era, he was spazzed out. So he got the moniker Cocaine Willie, and it's rode throughout generations. And we kind of just wanted to throw a little homage to that, that cat, and we kept it going, so we named the pod Cocaine Willie. It's it hasn't made it easy on us, opening doors for us to get into places that don't really want to be recognized with the brand Cocaine Willie, but it's our little inside joke, our little insight to Kansas State athletics, and once you really figure out what it's about, it's not as bad as it sounds.
I didn't. So I'm going to be honest. I want this to be out on the air because it's hilarious. I legitimately thought this was about Will Howard and his partying. This is not a joke. I'm not joking. I thought you named your hot podcast Cocaine Willie because of Will Howard and his partying with co-eds. Not a joke, for real. And I was that makes much more sense. But
that is a common theme going around in some of the back channel chat rooms right now. Is his off the field.
Hey, I'll tell you, I don't know what Will Howard's been getting into here in Columbus, and there's a lot to get into. But from what I know, and we're definitely going to talk on it, him at Kansas State was one of the most stand-up dudes you'll ever meet.
Okay,
and he was almost to the point where he was like straight edge. Like it seemed like he was like the straight-laced, button-up kind of guy. We've had some wild boys play quarterback here at Kansas State, and he was probably the farthest thing from that.
Okay,
he did have some offers to some Ivy League schools. I know coming out of where's it, Doylestown or Downstown or wherever he's from?
Downington, Pennsylvania.
Downington. Okay. Every time I see that, I'm like, it reminds me of the movie Digstown for whatever reason.
So I want to do two broad topics, and Dan, I'll get your take as well. So do Kansas State fans / like Big 12 fans, do they care about ESPN, SEC, the bias, not getting the kind of pub they probably deserve? The TCU K-State championship game a couple years ago, like, do people care like what Paul Feinbaum thinks in general?
I don't think anybody puts a lot of salt into what Paul Feinbaum thinks. The SEC bias, though, and where the Big 12 stands within, the big major two, where Ohio State is in the Big 10, and the SEC, where all the the power programs have been dominant for so long. The Big 12 has been on the edge of collapse for a while, and we're strong now. We're solidified now. I wouldn't say that we're near the Power 2 right now in terms of, top tier brands and programs like that in terms of football. Basketball is a different subject, but,
Correct.
Football, we've come to the realization that, and that's just the way it is. We survived the collapse when the Pac-12 thought about taking some of our schools, when obviously the SEC had some departures in the Big Ten, took Nebraska, and SEC took Missouri and all that. We've had defectors throughout the years since 2007, and we've survived. We haven't necessarily tried to put ourselves on a pedestal of where the SEC is, where the Big Ten is, but where we're at right now, I feel like we're stronger than we've been in a really, really long time. So is the bias there? Yeah, absolutely. And is it deserved for the SEC and some of the Big Ten members? Absolutely. Not all the Big Ten members, definitely not all the SEC members, but the tail is there. The tape is there that the SEC is probably the most talented, most dominant conference in America. And the Big 12, even when we had Oklahoma, even when we had Texas, as bad as they were for so long, they defected, and they're really good programs now. But the SEC stomped us for so long in terms of national championships and college football playoffs and all that stuff, that there was no reason that we could fight it. We could say, yeah, we beat them individually, and we beat them in bowl games and all this stuff. But in terms of national championships and draft picks and all that stuff that goes into why a conference is strong, yeah, I mean, the Big 12, they can't really fight that. But in terms of where we are in the pecking order, I feel like we're a strong third, and we're not going anywhere. So that gives us life, where we're not necessarily looking for the recognition that the SEC has, but we're still here.
Dan, so you went to Arizona. You lived life in Arizona. You live in Tennessee now. So you've lived in Ohio, and so you've seen all of that. So are you tracking with that? I mean, so it's hard for me to think of the Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. It's really like that's a struggle for me. Like I literally forgot Texas was in the SEC now, because I just think of them as some of the top tier programs in the Big 12. So, are you because you look at the Pac 6 or whatever it is now, they've kind of gone to the wayside. So are we? I mean, I tend to agree. I think the Big 12 is probably a strong third there.
Yeah, I think the ACC would probably beg to differ, but I think if you stack them up and look at them side by side and everything else like that, I mean, outside of Clemson, what has
Florida
anybody
State.
really done in the ACC? I mean, Florida State did all their damage yeah, I guess
they had a solid year last year where they're 12-0 and they get skipped over because their quarterback goes down. So that lets you know where you guys were talking about the SEC bias and stuff. They put Bama in over them. So
right.
Yeah. And I like your point about the ACC, but if their conference was so strong, I don't think Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina and all these teams and Virginia Tech would want out of the conference. They want out of that conference because of how bad it's been ran for so long.
Yep.
With
TV
bad media rights and all that stuff. So I think the Big 12 is solid third. We've got great leadership. We've got brand recognition. So yeah, I agree though that the ACC would have something to say.
Yeah.
Well, Florida State and Clemson are going to be in the Big 10 next year. So
you think it'll be that soon?
Well, I mean, I think the transition happens next year. They may not be officially in the Big 10, but within 1 to 3 years, both those programs will be in the Big 10.
Yeah,
and probably Miami. And North Carolina.
They're fighting tooth and nail and getting all the lawyers that they can involved to try to get out of that. But
and you don't do that without knowing where you're going. Somebody mentioned that recently.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't sue to get out of your conference without knowing where you're going, right?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna do one more thing and then we'll get into Will Howard. Because I'm genuinely curious and it matters to me. So I have friends of all different kinds of teams, collegiately. I have Michigan fans. I have Tennessee fans. I have Miami fans, and that's college football. I have family that are huge Texas fans, and because they lived in Texas until they were, like you guys, 12, 13 years old and moved back to Ohio. So do you, Andre, or Kansas State fans care? Now, I know you're not going to care as much as Dan and I or other Ohio State fans about Michigan's cheating. But does it bother other fan bases? Is it just like it happened? It's done. We know what it is. They're going to be paper champs. Move on.
Yeah. I mean, man, the cheating scandal. It's such a viral moment that everybody had an opinion on it. You knew that if it came to the NCAA that the justice was not going to be served. Mm-hmm. So what could they prove? What could they, to be honest, after the first little viral hit, especially with the way Michigan was rolling that year, you kind of knew that nothing was going to happen. So I kind of took my eye off of it. It just really didn't affect me all that much. We had a solid team last year in K-State, and I knew obviously Texas had a really solid team. Oklahoma State had a really solid team, but we're so far removed from that situation that I don't think a lot of people put that much stock into, we might have to face them down the road. Where will this cheating come into effect? So I don't think a lot of Big 12, and I can't speak for everybody, but I know for me and a lot of K-State fans, there was not really anything that we could say about it because we're so far removed from it. I mean, me living in Ohio, listening to 97.1 The Fan, and I'm around it every day. So I hear it and I understand, and I understand the plight of Ohio State fans of, man, this is garbage. I mean, our arch rival is cheating, whether it comes to recruiting, Jim Harbaugh, all this stuff, his suspension. A lot of people had felt slighted that they got away with all this stuff with just basically a slap on the wrist. But it for Kansas State fans, that is not something that was circulating the airwaves in terms of Michigan.
So,
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So it sounds like you think it's over.
Man, it is it? I mean, it like honestly, it was all the rave. SEC teams were talking about it. ESPN was all over it. And obviously we're in the off season, so it's not going to be, college football every day unless you're like Josh Pate or something that late kick. I don't really hear anybody talking about it. So is there stuff going
There's
on
still an
behind the
ongoing
scenes?
investigation.
They're going to get hammered. I mean, there's just no way they're not going to with what the NCAA did in an unprecedented move to come.
But they didn't do it during the season. I think, is that what you're getting at, Andre? They weren't going to do anything last year.
No, they definitely weren't going to be able to, get them and say, hey, you're void of playing these games. We're going to take wins away from you. And honestly, and what I'm thinking is, that Michigan team was ultra uber talented. They were really old. They had good players, a lot of first rounders, and all this stuff. And what I'm saying is, okay, they cheated, and even if they take away the wins in history book, we're all gonna. I mean, for me personally, they're national champions. They won. They won on the field. They won everywhere they went. So, I mean, I can't really say like are for argument's sake, are you going to take? They took away wins for the Ohio State tattoos and all that stuff, and giving away memorabilia. All those Ohio State teams were ultra dominant. Those were good teams. So for me, I'm not going to knock. Those Ohio State teams were really good. I don't care how many wins you take away from them. They're still those Ohio State teams, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I get it. I do. I was just curious because where I was going with this, it was a leading question. I did it on purpose. So let's say Kansas State goes 10-2 this year, and they sneak in as the 11th seed in a 12-team playoff, and now you got to play Michigan. How would you feel then?
Well, last time Kansas State played Michigan, it was in the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl, and we smoked them. So I'm not too scared about Michigan, really. Honestly, if all the rumors are true, they don't have a quarterback this year, so they don't have anybody to throw the ball. And let me find out that we get to go to the Big House and Kansas State smokes them again. So cool. I'm not too worried about Michigan.
All right, sweet. All right. So now the crux of everything. So Andre and I know Dan's got a ton of questions. So I'm going to help our audience a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dan. Can you give us a rundown of Kansas State's offense, what type of offense it is while Will Howard was there, and how does that translate to Ohio State? And then Dan, it's all you, buddy.
Okay. Right. So let's get into the meat of this podcast. Will Howard was in the 2019 class or the 2020 class. I think he was in the 2020 class. He came in as a true freshman in 2020. And obviously we know there was a global pandemic. I'm not going to get too political on that, but everybody, it changed the way we looked at college football and how we operated and all this stuff. So there was no spring ball for Will Howard when he came in as a 3-star prospect out of Downingtown, Pennsylvania, moving halfway across the country to a place that he only visited one time. His offensive coordinator at the time was Courtney Messingham. He was a old school I formation, run it down your throat kind of. He had a little veer in there. He wasn't a lot of
the veer. Are you serious? I got to go back and look at this.
No, look at his North Dakota State tapes.
Okay, that explains everything.
He was old. Our head coach was Chris Kleiman. He was coming off of a solid season in 2019, and he brings in a true freshman. His first quarterback that he recruited solely scholarship wise to come in. He doesn't get a spring. Courtney Messingham runs an old school offense. I mean, a very pro style offense with gadgets, a lot of offensive line pulls and stuff like that. Wasn't heavy throwing. I mean, 2 wide receivers at most of the time out there. Not a lot of shotgun, a lot of under the center, and a huddle. I mean, I know that's a foreign concept to a lot of young listeners and stuff, but we huddled every play. We ran that play clock down to 1 second every play. So that season was weird. Courtney Messingham, not a good offensive coordinator. I mean, he had his time. The time passed him. The game had evolved, and he wasn't up to it. So that season, we returned Skylar Thompson, who was, he was a pretty good quarterback for us. He was, long in the tooth. He wanted to prove something, but the pandemic hit. And so we're going into that season with reasonable expectations, but we lose our first out-of-conference game to Arkansas State. And it was not great. Not great vibes. Nobody in the stands for it. It was just bad. Bad looking offense. And Will Howard doesn't get that spring, and we play Texas Tech, I think the second game of the season or the third game of the season. Skylar Thompson gets absolutely obliterated, blows out his shoulder, terrible stuff. Will Howard has to go in. And he hasn't had spring. He had a little bit of fall, but we're obviously with the pandemic where the camps are shortened. We have to be socially distant, all this stuff, getting tested every day. So he doesn't really know the playbook all that well. And I know Dan's going to have some questions about the timeline of this, but that's how he's introduced to Kansas State fans. He's thrown into the mess, and he wins that Texas Tech game with a game-winning touchdown throw. So that's where Will Howard is in the situation that he is as his freshman season. So, man, there's a lot that goes on after that, but that the style of offense that we were playing was, ancient, and it was just not a good situation to throw a true freshman in.
And correlate that to Ohio State. I'm just trying to think. When I look at Will Howard, fair or not fair, he really reminds me the play, at least from what I've seen. And I'll be honest, I've watched probably 35 minutes of him total, other than the championship game against TCU. He reminds me of, and this will hopefully relate to you too, a bigger version of JT Barrett. That's who if I was going to do a correlation, the running aspect, kind of lumbers. He's not fleet of foot, but he can run. He can run the read. JT probably better downfield passer early in his career. Later in his career, after he messed his shoulder up, he was never the same. But is that fair? Not fair? I know the offenses are different.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely fair. I mean, JT Barrett, underrated quarterback in my opinion. Very, very underrated. But I think we're gonna get into it, but I think you're gonna have to learn what Will Howard's game is, and he is not. His downfield throwing is up there, in my opinion.
Okay. All right.
When you say up
all right,
there,
Dan.
what do you mean?
I
it's
think
all you.
I think his downfield throwing is a particularly strong point in his game.
All right. That definitely, that's interesting. I'm going to need to hear more about that. So, I mean, first of all, let me set the table. When Will Howard came in, I think Buckeye Nation was probably a little divided in the sense that, okay, is this guy really an upgrade from what we had? And then when he had his first press conference, I was really impressed with him. Very articulate kid, very well-spoken, charismatic, seems very confident. I said, you know what, this is a guy in that position that I can see a team rallying around. Now, for listeners of our show, and, Chef, I don't know if you know this or not, but I mean, I'm a huge Devin Brown fan. I'm not going to go into the details as to why. I just think the upside there is really, really, really big. But with that being said, my kid, I'm a little blown away that you said his downfield passing is a strong side, because all reports, like his NFL scouting report, is reports out of spring, reports by the beat, like everybody, like that is universally considered the worst part of his game by Buckeye Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Like his downfield accuracy, his and the statistics support that. So I really want to dive into that as to why you think that. But here's what it's the part I'm struggling with him is that, and I try to be unbiased when I look at this stuff. So I've looked at his highlights. There's plenty of highlights out there. And then I've looked at his lowlights. You know, I wanted to see, okay, where, you know, why were these lowlights? What did he do? Was it, you know, a Will Howard thing? Was it a surrounding cast thing? Was it a scheme thing? Same thing with the highlights, right? A lot of quarterbacks can get, you know, put up really, really big numbers, but they're a system guy, right? So try to be unbiased with looking at that. But when I kind of take the emotion out of it and I look at the statistics and we compare him to what we just had, you know, Bill Landis went into this the other day with Doug LeMarie. I always say his name wrong, but on Kings of Columbus, like if you look statistically, comparing him to Kyle McCord, his interception rate, his turnover worthy plays, his pressure to sack rate, his negative play rate were all nearly identical to Kyle McCord. Mm-hmm. They followed that up by saying Kyle McCord was a significantly better downfield passer. Again, the perception in Buckeye Nation is that that's not a strong part of his game at all. You know, his ability to extend plays is light years ahead of Kyle McCord. I mean, that was, you know,
that's clear.
That's clear. I'm not going to go into the fact that we win a natty last year if he can extend plays. And then, you know, you look at his statistics, 60, you know, his best year was last year with a 61.3% completion rate. When you know, again, just comparing him to Kyle McCord, I got a few stats here. You know, he ranked 77 out of 92 players that had 40 or more 20-yard throws down the field. McCord was fourth. He was 38th out of 73 players.
Are these all for last season?
Yes.
Or just in career?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to want some context with that. I firmly believe that context is important.
Well, I think, Dan, I don't want to cut you off, but we looked at some stats, and I think the season prior, the 2022 season, I believe, his stats were significantly better, him being Will Howard, than the 2023 season. Do you remember that 11 Warriors article we went over? I don't have it handy.
That's where a lot of these stats are coming
from. Yeah. So I think his 22. So can we dive into that a little bit, Andre? Like, why would they have been better 2022 versus 2023? And I think you'll get your context you want, Dan. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, man.
Yeah, what were the difference between those two seasons?
Okay, well, 22 season, obviously we're Big 12 champions. Going into that season, he started games, plenty of games. His sophomore season, he started fewer because Skylar Thompson stayed relatively healthy other than like a couple game stretch. So he didn't play as much. We wanted to redshirt him that year, but we just couldn't. We just couldn't. Yeah. We had too many quarterback injuries and just enough quarterback injuries where we couldn't redshirt him. And then we're going into the next season, which is 2022. Colin Klein is taking over as offensive coordinator. We just fired Courtney Messingham. 2021 was not good enough. It just wasn't. We couldn't cut it on offense anymore. And Colin Klein takes over. He significantly changes the offense to a spread 3-4 wide receivers, H-back with more pass catching ability. No longer is the fullback on the field. We still have Deuce Vaughn, a dynamic pass catching running back. So we go all in on that season. He goes and gets Adrian Martinez, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, out of Nebraska. Dynamic quarterback, can run it, can throw it. He's just coming off of an AC joint injury, so his arm is still kind of coming back into health. So Will Howard is taking most of the reps that fall. And most of them actually all of them in that spring. Most of them at the beginning of fall camp. Adrian comes in, takes over, he becomes a starter. Will Howard is fine with that. This is not his year. He finally gets a year to develop behind a quarterback and not have to get thrown into the fire per se again. This is his sophomore. No, this is his junior year.
His third year, right?
Yeah, this is his third year, hoping to redshirt his junior year so he can be a junior going into his starting season. 2022, Adrian Martinez starts off gangbusters. We're perfectly fine. Other than the Tulane game, we lose because he couldn't make the downfield throw. Offense was kind of sputtering at the time. We were just still trying to find ourselves because he didn't get a lot of reps in fall. Adrian Martinez starts turning it on. His legs start going, all this stuff. And then Iowa State comes around. He gets hurt in that game. Everybody sees it. He gets hurt, but he finishes the game. We win. Goes into TCU. He gets hurt on the first play after a 40-yard run, if I'm trying to remember correctly. Beautiful play. He gets up. He can't go the rest of the game. Will Howard gets thrown back in. And he absolutely lights TCU up in that first half. Kills them. I mean, taking over. We got a huge lead, and then we lose it because Will Howard gets hurt. We get thrown into our third quarterback that game, and it's bad news. We end up blowing a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter, all this bad stuff. But Will Howard shows the spark. He's throwing downfield passes. I mean, if you want to look up these highlights, these statistics can tell you a lot. And I will get onto what you were saying about the statistics of Kyle McCord and all this stuff. But he takes over, and he goes on an absolute run in 2022 season. He is a totally different quarterback under Colin Klein. He's taking chances. He's throwing into small windows and to a tight end that is emerging, also becomes a second-round pick in this NFL draft, Ben Sinnott, who is his best friend, which is also a part of the storyline later down the road, which shows his character. But Ben Sinnott becomes his number one weapon, a tight end. Our wide receivers, Malik Knowles, Cade Warner, they're producing because of what Will Howard is throwing them into windows. He's throwing dimes. That season, he was absolute money. The offense changed for him, and he leads us to a Big 12 championship game. So I see what you're saying about the statistics and all this stuff, and then comparing it to 2023, where he is the main guy, and unfortunately, Kansas State in terms of recruiting, not Ohio State. Totally different, recruiting area, high school talent, all this stuff. But we get our absolute 5-star gem of a quarterback coming out of the state of Kansas in Avery Johnson, who is, by all accounts, the next coming of whoever you pray to at night. And he has Avery Johnson, a true freshman, who is up here in his head, a fifth-year senior, who physically is faster than anybody on our team. And he's got that guy looking over his shoulder his senior year. And he's okay. He's good. Offensive line's a little shaky at the beginning of the season. He's still throwing into those tight windows, and that's where the turnovers come in. Because our offense, we lose both of our outside receivers, and our receiving core took a dip. If I'm being honest, it took a dip in 2023. So the playmakers are not nearly as strong as we had in 2022. We still have Ben Sinnott, and he's still doing great things, but wide receiver-wise, our number one wide receiver was Phillip Brooks. He's 5'8", and he's playing outside receiver for us. He has to. We have nobody else. Keegan Johnson's hurt. Everybody else is, true freshmen. They're not ready for prime time. But he's still carrying the team. Statistically, he's our all-time leading passer in terms of touchdowns. I mean, we've had decent quarterbacks here: Colin Klein, Michael Bishop, L. Roberson. We've had a long lineage. He's our all-time leading, if we're talking statistics. So what happened was our receivers took a dip. Offensive line was a little shaky. He's taking those chances. And it all culminated in Oklahoma State, where he had a 3 interception game, and it was just ugly. It was just bad. On the road on a Friday in Stillwater. Bad news happened.
Stillwater's a tough place to play, though.
It is.
I mean,
it is.
Even from a Big Ten footprint, like when I watch those Oklahoma State games, like that's a tough place to play.
So those are 3 of his interceptions in that game.
So is Autzen Stadium. So
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting to that.
Yeah.
And statistically, I think he had an okay season. I think his deep ball. If you look at the Texas game, the first half we came in there totally unprepared. We got murked in the first half. Put on the second half highlights of Will Howard versus a playoff contending Texas Longhorn defense, and show me that guy can't throw down the field. Because he's throwing absolute dimes that turned into an interception because our receivers are bad. I'm just going to get there. They're bad. They're dropping absolute dimes, bucket throws, 60 yards down the field, and it turns into an interception. That's what your stats will say. But if you're not watching the game, it's going to say it's Will Howard's fault.
I know what play you're talking about, and I recognize that right away. Did he battle injuries? I know you said in the junior year he got dinged up, but was that something that was on again, off again?
His junior year he was perfectly healthy. Junior year was perfectly healthy. Won our Big 12 title, looked great versus TCU, an absolute dime pass down the field to Malik Knowles on the sideline. He was great. Now, his senior year, we play Missouri, and the reports will not tell you this, but if you're watching the game, we're running him for some reason when we have Avery Johnson over his shoulder where he should be running the ball. He does run it a little bit, but Will Howard gets absolutely murked in his thigh, and that his lower body was never the same his senior year, so we didn't run him as much. The read option still worked. If you watch him versus UCF, you would say that his legs were perfectly fine, but you could tell that there was a lingering injury that, just kept coming back. But his senior year was, if I had to put it on a scale of what I seen Will Howard his junior year, throwing into tight windows with better receivers in a new offense, I would say his senior year was an 8. But like you said, he's going to Ohio State. He's going to have to go to Autzen. And you turn and put it in terms of statistics where he was 77th out of 90 and deep throw and accuracy and all this stuff, and Kyle McCord was 4th. Kyle McCord had Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka. He had Cade Stover. He had a lot of weapons to throw the ball up to. Will Howard never had that opportunity. Zero chances in terms of receiver help.
Well, that was actually a question that if we had time, I was going to get to. And Dan, if you don't care, I'll ask it.
You going to ask about how much does the talent improve?
The talent, just the difference in talent. So Kansas State's a D1 school. I respect Kansas State. I've told you that before you came on the show. I'll be real. I don't, Ohio State is Ohio State for a reason. We have the athletes that we have for a reason. So do you think that there really is that big of a difference between now? No, I know Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of a kind. So let's be clear on that. But remove Marvin Harrison. Do you have anybody? I hate to even do this. I don't even want to say it. So what? Emeka Ibuka could start for any college football program and be the number one wide receiver. But I'm trying to pull Marv out of that, Dan. How should I ask this?
Listen, I don't. There's zero debate whatsoever that the talent level at Ohio State is significantly better than anything he had to work with at K-State. No one's disputing that.
Maybe not tight end.
Well, I would argue that. I would argue that skill positions, yes, clearly.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
One of our best running backs of all time was a 3-star Deuce Vaughn, 5'6". He was dynamic. He would play in a lot of places. He might even get run at Ohio State. But this year, you've got Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at running back. Okay, well, what are we talking about? We don't have that.
Right.
Wide receivers, you got the freshman. I don't know what his name is, but he's a freak. Jeremiah Smith. He's a freak. You've got Emeka Ibuka. He would start at Kansas State. Tight ends, and then when you get closer to the line of scrimmage, I think Ohio State and Kansas State are comparable in terms of O-line protection, development in the trenches, because we have guys that go first round, second round talent in terms of line of scrimmage talent. But Ohio State, in terms of skill position, we don't recruit Florida like that. We don't recruit Texas. I mean, we recruit Texas, but we don't recruit the 5-star talent guys that you guys do. So I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue the wide receiver history because it's not anything to compare to Kansas State. But
I'm just trying to understand. Do you think that the abilities that the Ohio State wide receivers have and running backs will elevate Will Howard's game? Because you said his junior year he was throwing in tight windows. So I'm just trying to understand. Do you think that and you said there was drop passes that were right in the bucket, which I mean that happens to anybody, but I think I'm just trying to understand. Do you believe Will Howard in this offense with these playmakers will be not marginally better, but extremely better?
Let's not sugarcoat it. You don't need to sugarcoat it with me. I'm your guest. Ohio State's skill talent is going to raise Will Howard's bar. Okay. It is what it is. If you guys can figure out the O-line and give him time, he is a significantly better quarterback at Ohio State than he will be at Kansas State. He will have 24 touchdowns, which he ended his senior season at Kansas State by week 6, week 7. He will. It is what it is. He has significant talent upgrades in terms. He said it himself. You don't have to ask me. Will Howard said it probably the first time I saw him donning scarlet and gray. He said that the wide receiver talent, no offense to what Kansas State has, is significantly better. It just is.
Yeah.
So
here are my concerns is that I'm still blown away that his downfield arm throwing is a highlight for you. And here's why. Number one, that's not the scouting report on him. And number two, it's not what's happened in camp, right? So that's been the thing with him is that there's this perception that, well, once the game starts, he's going to be better, but it's not how he's been performing in camp. He has struggled with downfield accuracy. I know, and we've talked about on this show that in 7-on-7, he's been like 20 points lower in completion percentage than a couple of the other guys. Not just one other guy, but a couple of the other guys. And there's no pressure there. Anything less than 15 yards, they said that he's, really, really, really strong with that. His ability, his presence in the pocket, his poise in the pocket, his pocket presence is really, really strong. My concern, what I've always said is that, or what I've been saying along the way is that if we get into a game where we're down 2 scores in the fourth quarter, is he going to be able to throw downfield and bring us back? Or is that going to be, the shortcoming? That's my concern.
I cannot agree with that. I don't know what's going on in camp. I don't follow Ohio State in terms of what their day-to-day camp activities in spring when he's just first arriving there. He's new to the system. Devin Brown's been here 3 years. I understand that you like Devin Brown a lot. I've seen Devin Brown play. Not a huge role, but I mean, I haven't seen him throw the ball down the field.
No, they didn't ask him to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They tried to use him like Tim Tebow last year, and it's not who he is.
Tebow.
Right. And, I've seen Will Howard play for 4 years at Kansas State, and if we swap jerseys and swap talent, Kansas State would have won a national championship with Will Howard. That's how I see it. You said this is what I'm getting at. I mean, versus our toughest opponent last year, we were down 21 points, 24 points versus Texas. The toughest defense in the Big 12, probably a top 10 defense in the country, probably a top 5 defense in the country statistically. He threw for 300 plus, I think over 300 in the second half alone, and carried us back into that. And if we had a kicker that could kick within 17 yards and not have a bad snap, we win that game. So that's his comeback ability.
I'm wondering, and this is so I will be people know this that have followed this pod at all. I wanted Michael Pratt Now, Michael Pratt went pro. He was the guy that I wanted to bring in for Ohio State because I thought his skill translated well to what Ohio State does. He reminded me a lot of C.J. Stroud.
That's the Tulane guy, right?
Yeah, the Tulane guy. I've been watching him for 2 years, so I was like, man, like if we ever had a chance. Anyways, but
He's
how?
okay.
Yeah, okay, all right. So the question in my mind is how, you talked about Will Howard using the tight end a lot, so that would be within the 15 yards, and kind of Dan alluded to that. How do you think his skill set fits into the Ryan Day, Chip Kelly offense, zone read? And Chip Kelly's really creative. He likes to run, and he'll pull the guards, he'll pull a wide receiver, he'll, like Dan and I've talked about this, he throws these crazy blocking schemes together. There's a
huge misconception of Chip Kelly's QB run game, though. Huge.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying, like, do you think that Will Howard's skill set lends itself to what you know of Ohio State and what you know of Chip Kelly, moving away from the fact that, like, so Dan and I both really like Devin Brown, and I think that their skill sets are similar-ish, but not the same. And it was the same. Same with Kyle McCord. I thought they were similar-ish, but Devin, much like Will, can extend plays. So, do you think that?
Well, hold on. Let's be clear. We think. I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and have rose-colored glasses on. I mean, we know. I mean, like Andre just alluded to, like he's seen Devin Brown play, but I mean, I have always go back. Like, we haven't really seen Devin Brown play. We were going to get to see him play in the Missouri game, and he did what I said he was going to do. He came out and he was nervous for the first couple throws, and then he kind of settled in and he made a couple nice throws, and then he got hurt. And that's the knock against him, is he got hurt.
Yeah.
But he was not used last year. Like, what you saw last year is not why he was recruited. It's not what was on his high school film. So there's a sense of gut instinct there that you have to go on when we say, we like Devin Brown's upside.
You have to trust your quarterback room. These are your guys. I would never, no matter how many guys are in our quarterback room at Kansas State, I like all of them. They're here for a reason. I like them. They're going to, if they can play, they can play. Devin Brown, if he can play, if he outperforms Will Howard by some chance, which I doubt that he can do, because I've seen Devin Brown and I've definitely seen Will Howard play. Will Howard is the better quarterback in my opinion. Whether
so does his style translate then?
That's where I was going. He's not DTR. He's not DTR in a Chip Kelly UCLA uniform. Okay. But in terms of zone read, if he's healthy, if he's in shape, because that's another part of Will Howard's game, that he has to be in shape. He's an oak
tree, right?
He is a thick boy. He is beyond thick.
Were there issues with him staying in shape? Because
when he first came to campus, he was a 6'4", 6'5", 215-pound guy that ran like a gazelle. That's what he did. We thought he was a running quarterback. When he first got here, he ran for 100+ yards versus Texas his freshman year, or his sophomore year, and he was a running quarterback. He ran for close to 100 yards versus TCU his freshman year. But if you look at his family lineage, I don't want to get down this road necessarily, but his brother plays for Kansas State right now. He's an offensive lineman. He's 6'7", 330 pounds. So Will Howard has
337 pounds.
330 pounds. He's 6'7", 330 pounds.
Jeez, that's a big dude.
That's his little brother.
Okay.
And Will Howard,
I don't want to tamper, but does he have any interest in getting into the portal?
Is he a tackle? Can he play right tackle?
He is a tackle.
Right guard?
He is a tackle, and he. I'm gonna be. I don't want to bash the kid, but he's a project.
Okay.
He.
Most O-line guys are.
Yeah.
Even at a place like Ohio State.
Yeah. So he's a project. He's got to work on getting into shape. Which Will Howard, from all the videos I've seen, I just saw his little snippet with his favorite food places. He looks in shape.
He leaned out.
He looks good. And if he's
leaned
that
out
guy,
he's leaned out since he got on campus.
Yeah. If he's that guy, because he has when he was at Kansas State his senior year, he was pushing 250. He was a biggin. And
he's Jared Lorenzen.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, Chad and I joked. There was a picture of him and Devin and Julian Sane during spring camp.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, we're having a hard time getting a tight end. He looks like a damn good tight end.
he's big, and if he thins out his junior year, Big 12 championship year, I'm going to keep saying it because I like saying it. Zone read was an absolute killer. I mean, he is a red zone threat in terms of getting down there and getting to the goal line.
Can we talk about that?
Let's talk.
So he made it very clear, and I'm using his words. Like, he made it very clear in his first press conference here that he was hoping to run less than he has before. And I'm going to talk about that. Less means almost not at all. The guy, he's averaged less than 5 carries a game throughout his career at Kansas State. And there's this perception that he's this big time running quarterback. And I don't think that's accurate.
He has the ability to. He has the ability. We didn't want to because, like I've laid out over the past 50 minutes,
you were down to your last guy.
We're always down to our last guy because the reason why he even got into the game his freshman, his sophomore, his junior year was because of quarterback injuries. Yeah. We run our quarterbacks here at Kansas State. It's just part of the offense. And when you're a dual threat guy, you're going to be treated as a running back when you get past that line of scrimmage. And Will Howard he's quick. I mean, not quick. I shouldn't say quick. He's got long speed. Once he gets going, he's not quick.
Long strider.
And he can get to where he wants to go, but he's not avoiding anybody. So if a safety has got a beat on him, if he's not sliding, Will Howard is going to get wrecked because he throws his body around. He's not the strongest guy in terms of like running people over, but he's a good runner in terms of red zone smart. He's aware of what he's looking at, reading defenses in terms of getting to the goal line. If you've got Quinshon Judkins back there, you have to respect and this is where I'm gonna throw this little tidbit in there. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but RPOs is something we barely ran at Kansas State.
Really?
If you've got very rare. I mean, I can think of like 3 or 4 of them, like off the top of my head, and one of them was an interception off of a miraculous play. But we didn't run a lot of those. If you have the threat of Judkins, Henderson in the backfield with the receiver core that you have, the RPO game is going to be a strong point, which I think he can flourish in because he has the ability to pull the ball and run it if you don't respect him enough. And like you said, the
red zone statistics that I heard, I mean, 42 out of 50 red zone touchdown or trips resulted in touchdowns. Is that accurate?
That's what we do at Kansas State. We punch it in. When we get down to the red zone, because we use our quarterback in the run game so much that we add an extra body into the scheme that you have to respect. And in the red zone, when the safeties are pushed down, there's no deep ball, can't get behind anybody. You have to have the extra body, and Will Howard can do that. He's a touchdown stealer. I'm telling you, he is going to steal some touchdowns from the running backs that you have because he is so mobile. Whether he wants to run or not, he has that threat. Will he have design runs at the 50-yard line? I'm not entirely sure that they're going to just have a quarterback draw for him planned up.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
That's not Chip's offense. I mean, Chip, he'll say he literally said this in a coaching clinic this spring, is that he wants the running backs to run the ball 100% of the time on all read options.
So that's what I was actually going to ask. So for our, Urban Meyer crew, Dan, and I'm one of them. I love the QB power. You know that I like how it evens out the number. I know, but that I like
QB power.
You know that I like it.
I know you like it.
I need it. I need it in my veins.
It's not Chip's offense, though.
I know.
And what I'm here to tell you,
could Will Howard do that?
And what I'm here to tell you is, from the Kansas State perspective, he's done that multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's done it. It's just part of our offense. I don't know what Chip Kelly's going to run. I've seen what he did at UCLA. I've seen what Ohio State's ran. I don't know what Ryan Day is going to do with the wrinkles. But what I can tell you is he has the ability.
Okay.
Devin Brown has the ability, but Will Howard has that ability as well. He has the ability, as much as I can't come on here and tell you the statistics, I can tell you what I've watched, and he can throw it down the field. He can
So
throw
here's my
the
clincher.
15-yard intermediate pass.
Here's my last. This is my last question on my notes, and because I'm genuinely curious. So when we brought Will Howard in, I was pretty hyped up. Dan can tell you, like I was, and I want to know if you were Ohio State and you're Ryan Day, and you have the war chest that Ohio State does, and you know that we do. We have the green, and you can go out and you bring in Will Howard. If you were Ryan Day, it sounds to me like you would do it, and that you would be good to go, and you're off to your championship season. Is that true?
Of all the quarterbacks that were available in the portal,
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, because there's a large faction that really wanted Cam Ward. So, like, I'm going to talk about Ohio State's fan base. There was a large faction. I am not one of them. I was nowhere near it. That wanted Cam Ward.
Yeah, Cam Ward's a talent. You couldn't, in my opinion, you couldn't go wrong. But in terms of what you're getting this is where I can speak to Will Howard more personally than what you guys would understand. He is a culture guy. He is for the culture. He is for the teammates. He is going to stand up for all his teammates, and he will take the brunt of whatever negativity. This is the one thing that I heard. Can he survive Ohio State's, the negativity,
barrage,
what Kyle McCord couldn't do and why he got out of here? Will Howard can take that times 10. He is the best leader that we had at Kansas State in a really, really, really long time, in terms of standing in front of media when he messed up, because he did mess up his freshman year. You don't see quarterbacks their freshman year get tossed out to media availability after they throw 2 interceptions and lose a game, or get blown out 45-0 to Iowa State on the road. You don't see it. But Will Howard goes out there. He volunteers himself. I'm the quarterback. I go out there and I do that. So Will Howard is for his teammates. His teammates got his back, because when we bash him in the media after Oklahoma State for throwing 3 interceptions, Ben Sinnott, his best friend, his teammates were behind Will Howard. He could throw 3. He could throw 3 interceptions every game, is what they say, and we should still win that game because we have to have his back. We have to be better for Will Howard. Great. These are the kind of things that are going to – I don't know if they say that about Cam Ward at Washington State. I don't know if they say that. But these are what you're going to get at Ohio State. He is going to indoctrinate himself into the culture. He's going to be a Buckeye.
Okay.
That is what it is. I have all the faith in the world that Will Howard is the right choice for Ohio State, because that is my guy. I didn't want to see him leave. And the reason why he left is, it's a whole story in itself. And I kind of laid it out because we have Kansas's Jesus on our team right now. And he just, we kind of had to go with him. He's what you guys spend on NIL for Will Howard is what we're spending on Avery Johnson. So for better opportunities, because like you said, what NFL scouts have said for him to improve is the downfield throwing, which I seen at Kansas State. But if you give him weapons, NFL caliber weapons at wide receiver, I guarantee you're going to see a different Will Howard.
Okay.
Hey, you said something about 7 minutes ago when you've been saying downfield throwing, but then I heard you say something about the 15-yard intermediate throw. Is that what you're considering? Is that what you're considering downfield throwing?
No.
Downfield,
okay. Downfield for me,
I didn't think so.
No, downfield for me is 25 plus.
Okay, cool.
For me, it's 25 plus. For some people it's 30 plus. It's however you define it. We weren't very we didn't run a lot of 9s at Kansas State, but deep posts, deep corners. He has got those throws in his bag where it's 25 yards in the air on a rope. Can he throw the 60-yard bomb? Yes, he can. We just didn't we didn't throw a lot of 9 routes because we didn't have a lot of wide receivers that can beat press corners and just go by themselves.
So Dan, I'm looking.
Does his strength, real quick? Does his strength lie in more of a one read or half of a field read type thing, or is he somebody that can stand back there like a CJ Stroud and scan the field from left to right?
Hey, you're putting a lot of pressure on my boy Will Howard to be CJ Stroud.
Well, that's what we're used to, right?
Welcome to Columbus, man.
No, I get what I see. This is the perspective that you have is he going to be CJ Stroud? Is he going to be
JT Barrett?
JT Barrett, Justin Fields. I mean, maybe not Justin Fields, but Justin Fields was a different animal.
Justin Fields is
but
he's
he
a real
has
deal, man.
he has the ability to do all of these things with the weapons that you guys have at Ohio State. I'm 100% sure of this. He 15 yards in, he's money, he's nails, he's going to throw strikes, he's going to give his wide receivers the ability to run in space on a dime. If he has separation from the receivers that you have, I think you're going to be very happy with Will Howard. I'm telling you, man. I can't sell it anymore. I just can't.
Yeah. So, Dan, I'm looking at some stats, and I just wanted to bring this out. So, and Andre actually hammered this. So, in 2022, for passes above 20 yards, he had 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. But then in 2023, it was 6 and 4. So there's a huge disparity between the wide receiver talent, at least it seems like, for the downfield shots. His
senior year, where those 4 interceptions, I can tell you, I can almost name exactly where they came. I brought up the Texas one, dropped on a 50-yard bomb right in the bucket. That's one of them. Ben Sinnott, he had a miscommunication. He throws one into double coverage because Ben Sinnott ran the wrong route. He had one the next game where he throws on a wrong route again. The wide receivers owned up to these, and he throws it into the end zone, and there's nobody back there but a safety. It looked like a punt.
Because we lived through that in the Clemson game in 2019.
I remember that throw.
Olave broke off the route. Yeah.
That's 3 of them, and I think one of them came in the Oklahoma State game when we're trying to come back and win the game. These are the 4 interceptions that I can remember off the top of my head that are deep down the field. Now he had 6 more of them in that season, but a lot of them. One was an RPO in the UCF game, where the the cornerback makes an incredible play on the ball and interception it. You can't really. My crewmates at my podcast at Cocaine Willie, they get on me for turnovers. They don't think I credit turnovers enough to the people that actually throw the turnovers, or in basketball, football, whatever you say. But I cannot give a lot of these interceptions to Will Howard. I just can't. It's just not what I'm going to do, because I know the talent. I've seen it multiple times, what he can do, and you guys are going to be shocked. I'm telling. If he gets the run, if Devin Brown beats him, Devin Brown beats him.
All right, Dan. What else you got?
I mean, hey, that's why we brought him on, because I mean, we've been talking, and we all talk about this ad nauseum.
Yep. So Andre,
we haven't really had somebody on before that's watched him for the last 4 years. So
that's what I was just gonna say. I'm sorry, Dan. Gosh, there must be a lag, because I start talking and you're still talking. I apologize. Please finish.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that was definitely better. But yeah, there's a lag on my end. I'm sorry, guys. I was looking at this. So Andre, you nailed this. So the 4 INTs, 20 plus yards down the field in 2023. You said there were 6 more. So the 4 of them were between 15 and 19 yards down the field. And then the other 2 were 0 to 9 is what I'm seeing. I'm sorry, 10 to 19 yards.
10 to 19, yeah.
Yeah,
his completion percentage between 10 and 19 yards was 55% last year.
Yeah, I got a 5.
0 to 9, he's damn near 74%.
Yeah. And a lot of those are swing passes to DJ Giddens, screen passes. He's money. He doesn't short arm anything. He gets it to his receivers with the ability to run. He caught a lot of slack last year because of those intermediate throws being 55%. And a lot of it, I think, is a miscommunication on the receivers. I'm telling you, if you guys have Brian Hartline get his receivers on the same page with Will Howard, I'm 100% confident. I am going to be watching Will Howard with an eagle eye to see what he's doing, because I think you guys are going to be shocked with what he can do.
I feel like you need an Ohio State hat and a Kansas State sweatshirt the way this is going, man.
If I move this camera down that way a little bit, you're going to see a lot of Ohio State stuff in this basement.
All right, man. All right.
You know what? Speaking of the Ohio State hat and the reference to cocaine, maybe we should rename our show to "It's Not a Marijuana Leaf." Podcast.
Yeah, maybe. But I want to give a chance. So firstly, I want to say thank you, Andre, for coming on our show. I know that it can, we're like, with the internet, there aren't really any strangers, but we didn't know each other super well. So I appreciate you, like, all of your knowledge, your time, your effort into this. But I want to give you a chance to just like shout out your pod, tell people how to find it, all those things. And sincerely thank you. I know that like it can be hard because both Dan and I were kind of leaning Devin Brown. We're kind of over here like this, and then you're bringing us back to the center. So thank you for talking ball too.
Well, you need to speak for yourself.
Well, no, I know. I'm just saying.
No, I'm still. I mean, what's really prevalent in my head is guys that have been at practice in the spring that said Devin's looked better almost exclusively. So,
and if that's the case, and Ryan Day doesn't start him, and Chip Kelly doesn't start him, then that's on them.
That's on
because
them,
if everybody's saying that the quarterback's better, I don't care how much you paid Will Howard in NIL. If he needs to be better, he needs to be better. And from what he's done throughout his career, if he's going to be ready no matter what. Yeah. Once you see what Devin Brown can do, and if he goes on a run and he doesn't relinquish it, so be it. But if he does relinquish it, I know what Will Howard can do.
Yeah. That's been my take is I believe the downfield game has more upside with Devin. That's obviously based on gut and high school film. But the fact that we have Will Howard this year, I'm like, start Devin if he's performed better. He has to perform better. Start Devin, and if he gets hurt or craps the bed, you've got Will Howard there.
I think the thing about it is we haven't even made it to July yet. Fall camp hasn't. These guys have got shorts on still. There's no pads. Yeah. You're not. I mean, from what I know, how K-State runs camp, ones are with ones, and if you're going against Ohio State's defense, which is a totally different monster than probably anybody else in the country. Ohio State's defense is nobody that you want to see on the other side of you. So if Will Howard is going against the ones and Devin Brown's going against the twos, and however they're doing it, wait till fall camp. Let's see what fall camp does, because spring has a lot of spring superheroes that pop up, and then
you'll never hear
really
from again.
Yeah. All the reports coming out of camp is that they rotated them quite a bit. Devin,
Julian rotated with them, right?
Yeah, the report is that Devin ran with the ones first, almost exclusively, but they rotated them almost evenly, except for Nolan.
Well,
the other they rotated them out. They needed to keep them happy. I mean, that's one thing people don't. I mean, the roster management aspect of the college game today with the portal is huge, and that's spring I think was more about roster management than it was for anything. So to your point, Andre, when they start to scale back and give most of the reps to 2 or maybe at the most 3 guys, we're gonna get a much better feel for who's really performing best.
Yeah, and I think fall is where the team really comes together. So I don't take a lot of stock in spring because Kansas State has a ton of true freshmen that look like they should be playing in the NFL next week when they're lined up in shorts. So I'm going to give my nod to Will Howard. You guys, 50-50, however you lean Devin Brown. I'm going Will Howard. That's my guy. If you want me to give my shout outs, I don't know if we could still talk. It's up to you guys.
Yeah. So I would love to have you back after fall camp breaks. So if you're up for that, I would love to do that because I think that would be great. I think that'd be just good TV. And then, absolutely. Give your shout outs. But I sincerely appreciate you coming on the pod. Like The knowledge that you have about Will Howard at Kansas State, not joking, like I'm not joking. Kansas State just seems like the other side of the world to me from Ohio, because it's a different conference. I know who Bill Snyder is. I knew who they were in the late 90s. Like I'm that age. I think we're all around the same era. But I can't say that I look up and go, oh, well, Kansas State's number 5 in the country this year, So I appreciate you giving us the rundown of all things Kansas State football, Will Howard, and then the breakdown between 22 and 23 was hugely helpful for me just to understand, because you can look at stats and go, oh, that doesn't look good. But then if you understand the crux of the stats, it helps. So, yes, please, shout outs, and thank you again very much.
Absolutely, man. Well, I'm part of one of 3 from the Cocaine Willie podcast. You can find us on everywhere, any YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you want to listen to us. We do Twitter Spaces, do Twitter Lives, YouTube Lives, all that good noise. Shout out to my boy Bob, my boy Matt. Listen to us anywhere, anytime. If you talk to us on Twitter, especially me, I will talk back. So let's get a communication going. If you guys got questions, I'm always here.
Fantastic. Dan, I'm going to leave you with any last thoughts, questions.
No, man, we had you on here for context, and I think that's what we got, right? Context matters. And there's just, we can watch film, we can, but we don't know the team like you do, and we don't know what the situation was there. So I really appreciate you coming on, shooting us straight. In regards to that other game, the first Friday big Fox game of the year, go Wildcats.
Yeah, go Wildcats.
Go Cats. Yeah. Well, again, you guys, it's Friday, so have a good weekend. Everybody stay safe out there. And as always, we're going to do it differently. Go Bucks and go Cats the first game of the year. And thanks again, Andre. Dan, appreciate you guys. We'll speak soon. See ya.
Thanks, guys.